Well, hello and welcome back guys to another one of my DC Stargirl's videos, and today we're going to be discussing the 11th and second to last episode of the first season of the series, otherwise titled Shining Knight. Now, I've been wanting to discuss the entire situation with the CW renewing Stargirl for a second season, because now it's not going to be on DC Universe, it's gonna be moving to the CW network, and I've got my concerns about this, as do so many of you. But because of the limited time, because there's a lot to discuss on each and every episode, I haven't had the chance to do that. But if I do get the chance at the end of this video to bring that subject up and talk about it for a little bit, I'm gonna definitely do that. So let us get started first with the events of this episode. Now, I think this episode was split into three separate arcs. The first one is Courtney's arc, with her father, Sam Curtis. The second one is the Shining Knight arc. And the third one is the villain arc. Because there are a lot of developments with the villains here that we gotta take note of. So starting with the Shining Knight arc, he starts off staring at horses at the beginning of the episode, looking for a gallant white steed with fire in its eyes and victory in its heart, looking for his horse, Winged Victory. From a comic book perspective, and as he does mention later, in a story that is similar to that of the comics, but not exactly the story out of the comics, Justin Arthur, or Sir Justin, was a member of King Arthur's Round Table. Now, at some point on the pages of the comics, he frees Merlin. Merlin bestows a gift upon him, enchanting his armor, his sword, and his horse. The armor becomes lighter, yet more impenetrable. The horse gets two wings, hence the Winged Victory bit, as well as the Pegasus on his cap. And finally, the sword gets enchanted to be able to cut through anything whatsoever. But he's just remembering bits and pieces a little bit more every time a moment passes. I mean, he's remembering Starman's squire now. That's what he calls Starman's sidekick, aka S.T.R.I.P.E, aka Pat Dugan, even though when you think about it, when he knew Sylvester Pemberton, he didn't really know Starman. He knew him as the Star-Spangled Kid. But yeah, he might have met him later on after they disbanded the 7 Soldiers of Victory, after each and every member went his own way. Now, that's a reference to both the photo that we got to see a couple of episodes ago with the 7 Soldiers of Victory, and also the team-up out of the pages of the comics that did bring these three as members at the same time. But still though, on the Shining Knight, Janitor Justin looking at that mirror, getting startled after seeing himself as one of the Dragon King's drones or disciples. It is obvious from the get-go, he has been subjected to what they've all been subjected to. Now, we do get to know that later on when he tells the story, in a very emotional moment as well, but it is definitely obvious from the very beginning. Another thing about this is he does know that they've got a plan to do that to everyone, like to brainwash everyone, to mind control everyone, and he does warn Pat as well about it. They will do it to us all. That's what he says to Pat. He's referring to Project New America. He knows what they're planning. Not clear yet, not 100% clear-minded yet, that is, but he does understand what the stakes are here. But circling back to the source material though, the comic books, the state of disorientation with Justin, that's all about being frozen in ice for years on the pages of the comics, and then waking up in the 20th century, finding it difficult to readjust and cope at first. I think it's an Easter egg to just that, out of the source material. The Janitor Justin makes it to Pat's workshop. His delusions take over for a moment. He's seeing Pat as the Dragon King, seeing Beth and Rick as two of his disciples. Pat doesn't really realize who he is at first, but soon enough figures out he is Justin, and then comes an emotional moment with Justin finally breaking down and in full. Like, okay, it's time to let the waterworks out. I've got a friend, I found a friend, I found someone I could rely on. The entire situation actually with the Shining Knight, that's very emotional, well acted and well done on this episode. Now, there is the photo with the 7 Soldiers of Victory. It's coming back on this episode, and it reminds him of who he is again, in one hell of a sympathy-inducing moment, and an emotional one at that. We get a version of his story as he relays it, with Excalibur and all of that. It's not the exact story out of the comics, but however, an Easter egg to just that. But that brings us to the end of the Shining Knight story. There's a little bit more to it, like the final awakening of the Shining Knight, that little bit of finality to his clarity of mind. That comes though with Courtney's story, so gonna talk about that then. That's where the stories kind of overlap. But I'm gonna leave Sam and Courtney's story for last because Courtney's story out of this episode, I think it was the most important. I think it was the second yet the real becoming of Stargirl, because she's now Stargirl because she believes in herself, not in the fact that she's inherited something from a father that's not really her father. Gotta talk about that in detail, but let's first talk about the villain part of the episode. We've got Henry Sr. talking about his memory returning, making the reveal that Courtney Whitmore is Stargirl to none other than Jordan. He's also done his research. He knows that Pat Dugan is none other than S.T.R.I.P.E. Now Brainwave Sr. wants to kill them, wants to get rid of them. Icicle rejects the idea, hesitating because of his feelings for Barbara. Seems like part of it all is about his talk a few episodes ago. You know, his feeling of emptiness. He's not really satisfied as this project is coming to a close, as it's about to bear fruit. New America. Now, as expected of Henry Sr., looking at Icicle, listening to his thoughts, listening to him in general, you're trying to protect that woman that you've got a crush on, while I ended up killing both my wife and my son in order to protect your precious project. I believe in it. You should believe more. Like you're the initiator of all of this. How dare you? That's what you get out of Henry Sr., and you get the feeling at the very end of that conversation, like, you know, there's gonna be a struggle for power within the ISA if you go back on your plans, and if you decide to destroy all we built so far that cost me so much because of your crush on Courtney's mother. But considering the event held by the high school, you know, Henry's high school at the very end of the episode, over his death, the fact that Henry Sr. talks about sacrificing his son for New America as well early on in the events of the episode, I'd start saying that this is confirmation that Henry Jr. is dead. Okay, a lot of people are going to be like, oh, we did not see a body, but there has got to be a body for them to hold that event at the school. There's gotta be a body for Brainwave Sr. to have that conversation with Icicle, and that brings me to my point. I'd hate for that not to be true, for him to be alive, because one, the conversation and the event at the very end, they all indicate that Brainwave Sr. believes his son is dead. They indicate that Brainwave Sr. did all he could to kill his son. He did not try to save him. It was not a plan of his to fake his son's death. And that in turn means that the only way Henry Jr. has been saved, or could have possibly been saved, is he had that extreme control over his powers, saving himself. Now that would mean that he went from no control at the beginning of last week's episode, or the end of the episode before it, to full control and understanding of his own powers, which doesn't make a lot of sense, by the way. But there's also number 2, that would also mean that the emotional moment from last week's episode was a total waste, and I hate for that to happen. They did it so well, I hate for them to go back on it. I'm expecting this season might not do that, DC Universe might not do that, but I'm also expecting the possibility that the CW is going to go around and pull that stunt on the upcoming season, because that's how the CW operates. But okay though, there's another possibility. There was a hint at the beginning of the season when Dr. Ito, you know, the Dragon King, asked for the body of Zarek, like he was gonna reanimate him, like he was gonna revive him, and there's a possibility that he might do that with Henry on the upcoming season or at the end of the season. We're gonna see if that works out or not. Hopefully they don't pull that stunt, but I'm thinking if they do, by the end of the season, we're gonna see Henry Jr. accelerating his timeline into getting to that other part of his comic book history, like the villainous part at the end, creating a new ISA maybe on Season 2 with Brainwave Jr., Icicle Jr., and Shiv. But okay, here comes another Easter egg out of the comics. There's the talk about Henry Sr. feeling his powers grow upon Henry Jr.'s death. That's a reference to how it was the other way around on the pages of the comics, you know, with Henry Sr. transferring his powers to his son as he came closer to his death. But okay though, we're getting closer to the end of the villain part of the episode, and then we're going to be talking all Courtney all the time and until the end of this video. So there's the part where Jordan goes through Barbara's PC, finding out what she knows, her search history, Starman, knowing he has got to worry more, and he's got to cover his own tracks. There's the mind games with Henry Sr. and Courtney, you know, telling her that he knows who she is, that he blames her for the death of his son, that he remembers who she is as well. And finally, there is the bid, where as a product of what he's seen on Barbara's computer, Jordan has made up his mind, killed the Whitmores and the Dugans, and with a bit over 12 hours left on the New America Go Live, so we also know the timeline at this point. We know that shit is gonna go down so fast on the upcoming 2 episodes because they're basically a 2-part finale. both of them titled Stars and Stripe, with one being a part 1 and one being a part 2, one airing next week and one the week after. It's also a nod, the title of the 2 episodes, to the comic book Stars and Stripe, a series of 14 comic books, a series on which we see the Dragon King as the villain, on which we see the Shining Knight come to the rescue, as well as the 7 Soldiers of Victory, and on which we were presented with Courtney Whitmore as the second Star-Spangled Kid, even though the series did jump right ahead into making her into Stargirl. But that though brings us to the Dugan-Whitmore household, the last arc on this episode. We've got Sam Curtis arriving to town. I do love how Barbara at the beginning of the episode is in on all of it, like not just worried about her daughter anymore, but also concerned for everyone else, all those families out there. Now, as we did discuss last week, there were many points of transformation for her character on last week's episode, from rejecting to slightly accepting to more accepting, and the deal was kind of sealed the moment she listened to the translation of that recording of that Norwegian conversation. Now, to cut a long story short, and this is something I loved about this episode made us sympathetic towards Sam. I mean, the actor was well chosen, he did pull the role very well. He convinced Courtney that he cared all the way throughout the episode, before at the very end of the episode he pulled that jerk move with the locket. He was in it for the locket. I mean, I was so glad Pat went after him and gave him that punch in the face, because, yeah, I personally wanted to punch him. That entire story of Sam as well over the course of this episode, that made Courtney more sympathetic as a character. I think this is the most I've liked the character of Courtney on any given episode. But there are so many other things that I liked about this arc out of this episode. I mean, it does lead into Courtney coming to the realization that her real father at this point is Pat, not that other jerk, the one that she refers to as a jerk as well, even though for a moment there she did start seeing the fake good in him and liking it as well. Another thing I loved about all of this is how Barbara keeps buying into all of it more and more with every passing moment. Like, she's worried about her daughter, she doesn't want to lose her, but then again, she's also worried about all those families out there that would need Stargirl to protect them. The entire arc with Courtney and Sam on this episode, the entire arc with Courtney and her family, and the entire arc with Courtney and Brainwave, him realizing who she is, remembering who she is, all of that leads into a journey of newly found self-confidence for Courtney. So first of all, we've got the staff not working, we've got her willing to leave Blue Valley, her belief that she's not Stargirl, but then there's also the part that happens later on, thanks in a great part to Pat's words, his conversation with her, but also to her realization, Pat is the parent that counts. And what we get to watch over there, I would call it the second becoming of Stargirl, the real one as well. The first time at the beginning of the season that she became Stargirl, that was all based on her belief she is Starman's daughter, but this time around she believes that she is worthy, that the staff is responding to her because she is Courtney, because she is worthy of the staff responding to her, rather than because of whose daughter she is. It is like the staff wanted her to believe in herself as well, unlock the power within her, rather than just the power of the staff. Gotta love as well how this is brought about along with less disorientation on Justin's end, like all the pieces are falling into place. Now, my favorite quote out of the episode is Pat's words, heroes can come from anywhere. I think it's very suiting, not just of Courtney, not just of her origin, being Sam's daughter rather than Starman's daughter, but also about Justin. He came from somewhere else in time, somewhere completely different, a different world, a different life, but he's still a hero. A statement that would go against Rick's disbelief that this guy came from a different time, his denial of the idea. But now that we've got a little bit of time, like 1 minute max, we're going to talk about the CW situation. I think my biggest worry with the show moving to the CW is all about how the CW does stuff. The extreme focus on politics, the extreme focus on relationships. Like, a relationship is what drove Arrow for a long while, the Felicity-Oliver relationship, Olicity as they call it. The Iris and Barry relationship, that's also one thing that's been driving The Flash mostly over the past few seasons, and that's a problem in my opinion. I mean, if I'm watching a show titled Arrow or a show titled The Flash, I'm watching a comic book show, I'm watching it for the superhero and not for a major focus on the relationship. Well, the superhero bit does take a backseat in comparison. And this is not all about, the things you're gonna use to attack this comment with in the comments down below. This is about something else. This is about a network that created a historical, or supposedly historical series that was Rain, by the way, and kind of butchered the story in favor of the same thing. They butchered history in favor of that very same thing. So no, I'm not really hopeful about this series moving to the CW, even though I'm hoping my expectations are completely wrong. With that said though, you can as usual let me know what you thought of the episodes in the comments down below, what you expect of the upcoming episodes as well. If you've got any Easter eggs that I did not catch on this episode, you can let me know as well if you did like this video by dropping it one of those much appreciated likes, subscribing to this channel, and make sure while you're at it to enable notifications in order to get updates whenever I upload a new video, publish a new community post, or start a new live stream. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, thank you so much for tuning into this one, stay safe, and have a great day.